Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to England once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, and I would say that generally speaking, this brewery are just a very solid all-rounder actually. You get some really nice IPAs from these guys, and they're also very good when it comes to the stronger and maltier side of things. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I know they do very well. This beer is one of their more accessible ones, and I've just been meaning to get around to trying this one for a little while, and just it's never happened. So I thought it was about time we made a review for this beer. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review we will head to a little place called Buxton in Derbyshire, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Buxton Brewery. Now this one is called Storm Shadow. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and it's an Imperial Stout. So at 8.5% ABV, it is one of the lower ABV Imperial Stouts that you're going to come across, both from Buxton and generally speaking. But this beer is very readily available through Tesco shops here in Scotland, and I guess down into England as well. And I've seen it about many times, so I just thought it was about time that we had a look at this one here on the channel. So as I said earlier, hopefully it's a good one, but let's crack on with the review and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Buxton Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit once more about Buxton Brewery then. So as I've mentioned to you already, Buxton Brewery is based in Buxton, which is a small spa town in Derbyshire in the middle of England. The brewery began with the first ever brew by Jeff Quinn back in 2009. So these guys are a very well established name, we should say that right from the off. But Jeff had studied physics and he had a background in engineering before starting up the brewery, and for a period of time he was cuckoo brewing, or gypsy brewing in other words, at another local microbrewery before they got their own facility up and running in January of 2010. And in the beginning they were brewing just small 800 litre batches. But today the brewery can be found on Staden Lane in Buxton in a 7,000 square foot space, and at full capacity these guys can produce over 60,000 litres of beer per month, and their beers are now exported worldwide. So that tells you that these guys are producing somewhere in the region of 750,000 litres of beer per year, at least when these were the latest figures that I could find, because I did research these again recently to see if there had been a change, but couldn't find anything. But the Buxton beers, of course, have won many accolades, and this brewery has been consistently ranked amongst the top 100 breweries in the world by Rate Beer, which for an English brewery from a very small town, I think is a pretty damn good feat. But the local area in which this brewery is located is known as the Peak District, and it's famed for its water, and this has been revered since the Roman times. They apparently used to call the town Aqua Arnimatea, which I've probably pronounced wrong, but this translates to the waters of the goddess of spring. Obviously a very good accolade. But most of the beers in the early days were named after local geographical and geological features around the Buxton area. This has changed over time, and the beers have got, medieval names and weather names and all of this kind of thing. But the tower that's depicted on a number of the Buxton labels is actually called Solomon's Temple, or the Grinlow Tower, and this was actually a folly tower that was built simply for decoration actually. So the Buxton Brewery, somebody there, they used to use this on a lot of their things, but as I say, you don't see it so much anymore. They tend to just use this text that you'll see on the top of the can here. But since 2013, this brewery has also had their tap house in the old courtyard on George Street in Buxton, and that's their kind of home bar, if you like. So I do hope that when I do my England tour at some point, we can go and actually film that and have a look at some of the different Buxton beers on tap. I think that would be really interesting. But as of October 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced over 200 different kinds of beer. And like I've said to you a few times, they are a very well respected brewery in England, one of the more established names actually, who have they've been there, done that, and they do a lot of different styles of beer. So they are definitely worth checking out if you haven't come across their beers already. So yeah, that is all I can really tell you about the Buxton Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on, have a little look at the beer itself. So the notes that I took on this beer from the website is that this one, the recipe they've used for this particular beer is a blend of two old Buxton recipes. This is the Stormbringer, which is a 7.5% export stout as they called it, and the Rain Shadow, which was a 10% Imperial stout. So they've kind of mixed the two ideas from this from these beers and come up with the Storm Shadow, which I think is pretty good. And as I said, this beer is produced for Tesco stores throughout Scotland and England, and I guess Wales and Northern Ireland as well. But quite an easy beer to come across, this one, but one that I have wanted to try for a little while. And I think it's been a good while actually since I had an Imperial Stout from Buxton. The last beer we reviewed was a Scotch ale or a barley wine, if I remember rightly. And then before that we had the Kingslayer IPA, which was one of their better known ones as well. But yeah, I think that's everything I can really tell you about the beer. I don't think there was too much more to say about that. I didn't say any of the different the types of malts that they used, other than that this one was an all grain stout, and it didn't tell you anything about the hops either. On the can here it says a brooding heavyweight stout crammed with intense deep roast speciality malts. So yeah, as you can see, it's a 440 milliliter can. I think this beer cost me something like £3. I think that's, you know, for the Tesco craft beers, normally £3 a can is kind of what you're looking at, but nothing wrong with that. As you can see, there is the Buxton Brewery symbol. You can see the Storm Shadow there, and I don't think there's anything else really to show you on the can, just a plain silver top on this one, and it's reflecting off the light. But yeah, 8.5% Imperial Stout. You probably could argue this is an export stout in a sense. I think export stout, yeah, probably 8.5% is the very minimum that you could argue for an Imperial Stout, I would say. 8.59% is probably the borderline for an Imperial Stout. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. Very curious to see what this one has in store for us. If I can get the can open, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So let's get this guy out and into the glass and see how we go. Yeah, I think that's most of it. I guess we can just put the rest in. We've still got enough room to do the aroma and things like that. But yeah, let me just line up the can again. And there we are. So, as you can see, this beer has poured as you would expect from an Imperial Stout. A lovely, big, dark, ebony rosewood colour. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. The head, incidentally, is about a half finger of a frothy, I would say, kind of medium tan head. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what you would expect from an Imperial Stout. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, that determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. An Imperial Stout will usually undergo a fairly lengthy wort boil, you know, about 5-6 hours, something like that, if not longer. I don't know about this, considering that it's only 8.5% ABV, but usually when you're looking at the flavour of the beer, you can tell by how sort of leathery the brown sugars are, how leathery and kind of caramelised they are. So that's usually a giveaway of the length of wort boil in pretty much any beer, to be honest with you. Yeah, any adjuncts that you put in and any barrel aging that you do can affect the colour of the beer as well, but usually when it comes to Imperial Stouts, the fact that you've often got black malts in there usually nullifies any effect that you're going to see there. But in terms of what we would expect from an Imperial Stout, this one looks the part. If we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of a kind of chestnutty kind of edge to it, but yeah, a little bit of a chestnutty kind of Pepsi Max Cola sort of coloured edge to it. But this is exactly what you would expect in terms of appearance from an Imperial Stout. So nothing overly surprising about this one. And, you know, 8.5%, you might expect it to be a little bit you might expect a little bit of transparency to it, but yeah, this one is pretty much black as night. And knowing Buxton, you wouldn't expect anything less. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on with it. Ooh, yeah, that's pretty solid. So I'm going to say this straight away. I suspect this one is going to be along the lines of like a Russian Imperial Stout. It's going to be one of these more kind of big bitter ones. But yeah, because remember, these days they've got quite a few different stouts. You've got milk stouts, you've got Russian Imperial Stouts, you've got pastry stouts as well. I'm not a great fan of the pastry stouts, right enough. I'm trying to think if I've missed any other ones. You've got, you know, Irish dry stout and stuff like this as well. But yeah, I think this one is, you know, the idea behind this beer is to be like an old school Imperial Stout. But yeah, it comes across very, very nicely. This, so you got a big roasty bitterness in the aroma there. You can smell there is a wee bit of sweetness to it as well, though, and the hops are kind of giving you a bit of smoothness, and you've got a wee bit of fruit. So all things that you would expect from an Imperial Stout, of course. So let's just take a closer look at that aroma and break it down for you before we actually get on and taste the beer itself. I'm just going to say it is very nice. Remember, this is an all-grain stout, no adjuncts in this at all, not even coffee beans. Although you could be forgiven for thinking there's a wee bit of coffee bean in this. But yeah, I think this is going to be pretty good actually. So, backbone of this beer, you do get a nice little bit of woodiness out of this one. So you can smell the woody, you get this sort of woody character that just forms the backbone for me. On top of that, you get a nice kind of brown bread crust in there. There's a little bit of an almost kind of rye bready element to this one as well. You've got that nice kind of sweet brown bready character coming out of this beer, which I think works very, very well. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. I like a kind of big, smooth, bread crusty, brown bready backbone to the beer. Do we get some chocolate out of this? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I think there is a wee bit of a black malty character to this one as well. You can certainly smell some of that harsher, more kind of really roasty, toasty black malt in there. So I think we've got kind of woody backbone, bit of black malt, bit of kind of bread crust, sort of brown rye bread, and then I think we do have a little bit of chocolate to this one. Not too much actually. I think the chocolatey notes that we get are a little bit more of a kind of dry cocoa nib type chocolate, so I get a little bit of that in this one. So yeah, nice dry kind of cocoa nib. Yeah, nice kind of dry cocoa nib chocolate in this one. But it's not overly prominent. I'd say it's I'd say it's a sort of 60%, maybe 50-60% cocoa, because you do get a wee bit of milky chocolate out of this one, but at the same time you get a wee bit of a more kind of darker cocoa chocolate coming out of this one too, which I really like. So yeah, the way this goes together I think is very, very nice. In terms of the kind of brown sugary notes in this beer as well, it's quite interesting because you can certainly smell a bit of sweet caramel to this one. You do get a little bit of that more kind of highly caramelized treacle molasses sort of thing, and there's also a wee bit of a kind of biscuity character coming out of this beer as well. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. The brown sugary elements in this beer are very, very nice. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of more highly caramelized sort of thing, a sweeter caramel, and then you've also got that more kind of, you also get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity element to this one too. So I really like what's going on with this beer in terms of the brown sugary side of things. So yeah, I think in terms of the malt base, this one is pretty good. It's as I say, the more that you smell of this one, the kind of sweeter and smoother it becomes. And I do like the kind of bready elements that the beer has. So I've got a good impression of this one from the malty side of things. So just keep that in mind with this beer if you do try it. But let's have a look at the hoppy and fruity side of things before we taste it. So hoppy side of the beer, I would say that it's more kind of smooth than anything else. So you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. You get a nice little bit of earthiness in here. You get a little bit of a kind of floral aromaticity out of it as well, which I really like. So yeah, nice big kind of floral aromaticity. But that does take a bit of a backseat to the more malty side of the beer, and again it comes across quite smooth, but you do get a little bit of a wet, grassy sort of thing with this beer as well. So the way it goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, nice little bit of a floral aromaticity out of it, wet, grassy character, like I said, and also some good, some nice earthy characteristics to it as well. So yeah, these are all things that you would expect from an Imperial Stout, to be honest with you. The more that I smell this beer, I do get a little element of a kind of cakey sort of note out of this one, like a cakey chocolate brownie kind of thing. And on top of that, you're starting to get the fruits. So let's look at that. So fruity component of the beer. I find it quite soft and oily in a sense. So for me, there's a little bit of a kind of... For me, there's a little bit of a sort of... can you say pruny? It's got a little bit of that dried note to it. I don't find it quite as sharp as raisins, but yeah, there's certainly a wee bit of a nice kind of pruny character to this one. Bit of a kind of figgy element to it as well, and also some black curranty and blackberry type notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, I like how this I do like how this goes together from the fruity side of things, and it's as I say, this is one of these stouts that gives you everything you expect and everything you would kind of want from the style, and it doesn't really do anything surprising. But I think it's going to be one of these beers. Knowing Buxton, it'll be one of these ones that's just really well crafted. Actually, that's what I've kind of to expect from Buxton. When these guys put out a beer, it gives you what you expect, and it's just really damn solid. And you can't ask for much more than that these days, to be honest with you. So that's my prediction for this beer, based on the aroma. Lovely mix of smoothness, sweetness, and a little bit of fruitiness as well. So yeah, good stuff from Buxton so far. But I think it's about time that we taste this one. Take a bit of time to ponder over that aroma before you taste it, though, as I always say. But yeah, this is the Storm Shadow, an Imperial Stout coming in at 8.5% ABV from Buxton Brewery in Buxton, Derbyshire, England. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, and cheers. Yeah, I'm going to say that is pretty good. Old school Imperial Stout all the way. You can really feel the bitterness in this one building up the more and more that you drink of it. So gets a thumbs up from me from that perspective too. So, yeah, I think, what would we say on this point? Well, I mean, first off, as I say, it is definitely stylistically, this is an old school kind of Russian Imperial Stout. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. Bitterness is fairly solid on it. I think it gives you the impression it's going to be a bit more sweet, a bit sweeter in the aroma than it turns out to be, but it is pretty solid, this. You know, it's, as I said, old school Russian Imperial Stout. I think that sums this beer up quite nicely. But let's break down the flavour for you and just describe it a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, I will say it smoothens out after a few bits of it as well. But yeah, let's do the malty side of things, as we always do. So, backbone of the beer, you can feel a little bit of that roasty, toasty black malt just blanket in the middle of your palate, but that's very quickly smoothed out by a smoother kind of brown bready, toasty bread crust. And that's middle and back third of your palate. Now, if we focus on that middle third of your palate a little bit, on top of those layers, you can feel that towards the front of that middle third of your tongue, it's got a little bit more of a kind of smooth, it has a little bit of a kind of more smooth, woody element to it. So yeah, on top of that though, you get that nice kind of brown bready, German rye bread type thing. I really find you get a lot of that in this beer. The bread's almost kind of sweet, which I really quite like. I always miss the German breads from living over there in Germany. The German rye bread was absolutely beautiful. but pardon me. Yeah, black malt, bread crust, big brown bready characteristics to it. Yeah, and a bit of woodiness in the middle third of your palate there too, which is great. But yeah, on top of that, you do get that nice kind of, you get that sort of, how would you say, you get a little bit of that kind of toasty, high cocoa chocolate actually, so you can feel that towards the back of that middle third of your palate. You get that more kind of, you know, sort of 70-80% cocoa chocolate in there. You can feel the sort of dryness of that, but as you come further forward on that middle third of your palate, you can feel that it sort of mellows out a little bit, and as you reach the front of that middle third of your palate, it certainly gives you a little bit more of a, it gives you a little bit more of a kind of sweeter, milkier chocolate, I have to say. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. And on top of the chocolate, that's when you start to get the brown sugars. So in the middle of your palate, you've got this little circle there, and you can feel that the backbone of that malty kind of side of that brown sugary part of the beer, you do get that nice kind of leathery brown sugary element out of it, which I really quite like. So you can feel that there, and that kind of indicates, as I said earlier, that this beer might have a little bit of a longer boil to it. So yeah, you get that, and if you go to the very dead centre of your palate, there is a bit of a sweet caramel in there, and you can feel it's kind of highly treacly, treaclised and molasses-like, and as you move further out from it, it gets a little bit more sort of biscuity and things, so there's a wee bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to it. But yeah, quite a kind of leathery, highly caramelised brown sugar in there, a wee bit of sweet caramel and a wee bit of biscuit, so I like how that goes together. But you can feel the further into the aftertaste you go, you can feel the sort of black malty notes just pushing their way out from the underside of that middle third of your palate. So that's interesting too. But let's look at the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing. And yeah, I do like how that goes together as well. So that gives you, it kind of builds into the kind of yeasty part of the beer. So back third of your palate, quite a lot of well-fired bread crust in there. It's really quite toasty and intense. On top of that, you get the bread crusty elements. You can get a wee bit of the rye bready notes in there as well. And again, it comes across as a bit grainy. But then on top of that, you've got a little bit more of a, how would we say? Yeah, on top of that, you've got more of the kind of yeasty elements coming out of the beer, so you can feel that kind of smooth, brown bready sort of yeast there. So on the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavours taller, and as I always say, as you come further forward, it condenses down, and as you go into that middle third of your palate, the flavours just squash together a little bit. Certainly not the thickest of stouts that you're going to come across, but we'll come back to that when we talk about the mouthfeel of the beer. But malty, yeasty side of things is pretty solid. Like I say, old school sort of Russian Imperial stout beer this. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, on the hoppy side of this beer, in the back corners of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's got a little bit of herbal quality, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you get a little bit of floral aromaticity, but the floral notes are quite smooth, to be honest with you. Round the front curve of the palate, there is a wee bit of grassiness there, tiniest little bit of zestiness, but again, it's quite smooth. I should point out as well, though, that I've had this beer sitting in the fridge since my last trip home, so it's been sitting there a few weeks, and with a stout, it's going to sit there on the shelves in the supermarket for a wee while. So I don't know exactly how old this beer is, but with an Imperial stout, to be quite honest, it doesn't matter that much. But you should know that the hoppy character will drop out of the beer over time, so the hoppy notes will get smoother and smoother the further on that you go. But as I say, it's, when it comes to Imperial stouts, you're not looking for a hoppy beer, you're looking for something that's more malty, to be honest with you, so not such a big deal in my opinion. But yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the green component of the hops. So let's look at the fruity part of the beer then, front third of your palate. Yeah. So, border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, a little bit of a bready build-up in there. It actually becomes a little bit more cakey and brownie-like the further that you go into it. And then You can feel that kind of pushing forward into the front third of your palate, but then the base of that front third of your palate is a sort of smooth, rye bready sort of thing. So you get the cake sitting on top towards the back of that front third of your palate, then the more kind of bready sort of things going further forward. But yeah, on top of that nice, on top of that kind of cakey, bready sort of thing, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So towards the back of that front third of your palate, then you can feel some interesting things going on. So you've got a wee touch of a raisiny sharpness there sitting on top of it. Underneath you've got a more kind of dried, pruny sort of thing. So yeah, that's very much like it. Yeah, I mean, it actually really leans, this beer. I think it leans towards that more dry fruity side of things more than anything else. It's like a sort of fruity, cakey sort of thing you get. So yeah, bit of raisiny sharpness, but underneath that quite a bit of prune for me rather than even oily plum. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of figgy note there, but I find you get a bit more of this kind of dry, black curranty sort of thing. You do get a little bit more of a kind of oily blackberry sort of you get this more oily blackberry sort of thing coming out of this beer, but the thing that lingers there is the prune, the fig, and the black currant for me, those more dry fruits, and some of the cakiness that lingers there too. So this is a really interesting beer from the from the fruity side of things. It's not quite what I expected, but yeah, as I say, I've not drunk too many stouts that are this 8.5%, because I think you probably could argue that this is an export stout. Usually the stouts that I drink are big 10% beasts. I've had I don't really drink many of the lower ABV stouts, and I don't really drink many of the kind of mid ABV stouts. Most of the stouts I drink are massive big beasts, so this one in some sense is a little bit of a kind of unknown entity to me. But it's still interesting. The flavours are nice, but they're not quite as intense as I'm used to. So that's worth memorising. Remember, in Scandinavia as well, we're kind of spoiled by the Imperial stouts there. And I've had a load of Finnish ones recently as well, which were ridiculously good. But yeah, this is solid as a sort of mid-strength stout. I think that's fair to say. But let's round off this review with the mouthfeel then. So I would say that this beer is... yeah, I mean, it's very much kind of top end and mid-bodied. The carbonation's smooth. It does have a certain kind of silky mouthfeel with it. So, yeah, I think that, yeah, it does have that kind of certain silky, smooth mouthfeel to it, which I think works really, really nicely. And yeah, I would say that stylistically, as I said earlier, it's a Russian Imperial stout. No doubt in my mind about that, or you could probably argue it's a Russian export stout, whatever, I don't know. I'm not too clued in on where the different border regions are between, export and Imperial and so on. But yeah, this is definitely one of the more roasty, toasty ones. In terms of IBUs, I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of around the sort of 70, 80 IBU mark. I think it's one of the more bitter ones. I don't think it's a full kind of 100. It doesn't feel overly bitter. There's a good smooth element to the malt base, a bit of kind of dryness to it as well, and a wee bit of sweetness. But yeah, as I say, some of the IBU I think comes from the roasty, toasty black parts of the malt base. The fruity side of the beer is nice and dry, but a little bit kind of sweet and a little bit of sharpness in there as well. But yeah, I do like how the beer goes about its business in that sense. But yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me actually, and I really like. I do like this one. I would like to try, I have to admit, I would like to try the original Rain Shadow, the big Imperial Stout from these guys, because I remember back in the day I had a big Imperial Stout from them, and it was good. So I think trying the Rain Shadow is something that I do need to look at, and I think they release that beer every year. I think they release a new vintage of it, so that is something that will be looked into. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This is a nice... classic Russian Imperial Stout. Does the job, does what you expect, and for £3 in the supermarket, I think it is pretty good value as well. So yeah, we can leave it at that for this one. So this one is the Storm Shadow, an 8.5% Imperial Stout from Buxton Brewery in Buxton, Derbyshire, England. Definitely worth trying if you get the chance. So have a look at it and try some of the other Buxton beers as well. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers from Buxton Brewery are, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point soon. But until the next time, slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.